Welcome back to our Simple Healthy Life podcast, where our goal is to have real, insightful discussions on topics that we find interesting. Today, we would like to talk to you all a little bit about discipline, specifically self-discipline. When we did our discussion on confidence, we asked the question, is it innate, is it learned, or is it a skill that you can develop?
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, most people were on the fence, they weren't sure. But I think that we did a pretty good job of proving through our discussion that it's a skill that you can develop.
Yeah.
So my question for you about discipline is the same one. Is discipline something that is innate? Are you born a disciplined person, or is it a skill that you can learn to develop?
Yeah, I think as with anything, it's maybe a little bit of both, right? And I truly believe that someone can learn to be more disciplined when we're talking about maybe the achievement of goals or pursuing goals through this idea of self-control in some essence. So I can get behind the fact of that being absolutely something that someone can grow in, right? I do think that where people get lost is that their environment, especially when how they've grown up, probably does dictate their tendency to be more or less self-disciplined, right? If you're around a kind of a chaotic household that has a lack of order, so to speak, then you're probably not going to get the practice through those years, right, to be able to cultivate self-order.
So can I stop you there for
Sure.
1 second? I love what you just said there about getting the practice through those years. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think that that's something I had never really thought about.
Yeah, well, you could see this, right? You could see, we've talked with many people now about who have, like, from their young years, have had these influences, these familial influences that have then kind of developed into, either passions of theirs or strengths of theirs. But I believe that, that nature-nurture thing is interesting because, yeah, there probably is some essence of character trait in all of us that says, where are we gonna hang out discipline-wise? Like, are we more or less disciplined, and do we more or less have self-control? I mean, they do studies on this with children, and they see that there's varying degrees of self-control there. Specifically, like the ones that are always interesting. They put a marshmallow in front of them, and they say, well, if you take this marshmallow, I mean, you can eat it, or you can wait and get 2 marshmallows, right? And it's interesting because there is a variety of experience there, right? There's a variety of how discipline is expressed within young children. However, I would venture to say that is influenced heavily by how their parents nurture them, I suppose, how their parents kind of like dictate the household. And so they probably do get some amount of practice day in and day out around discipline, for better or for worse, right? Whether that's total lack of discipline or they're actually getting a lot of discipline, this kind of external discipline, which then may teach them self-discipline.
Wow. As you're talking, I keep thinking about the fact that not only is it the way that you are taught about discipline, but also likely to be the people you're around, seeing how disciplined they appear to you, or how much self-discipline they have.
Yeah.
And you hit on a lot of points there real quick. One of the things I wanted to get to, so first of all, I believe that discipline is a skill. And I believe that even more strongly now, based on your answer, that it's just the number of reps you get. Because we're all breaking down. We're all not being as disciplined as we could be. We all miss workouts. We all miss goals. We all have issues and challenges in the discipline area. I know that that's true for all of us. I won't even sugarcoat it. But the more opportunities you get to try, the more reps you get, the more disciplined you inevitably become. And maybe our biggest issue is just our issue with time. And we think it's supposed to only take so much time to become more disciplined. But if you get the right start when you're younger, you develop that habit, and then you can build on it. But if you don't get the right start, if you didn't get it, you're just unfortunate set of circumstances, you didn't get it, you can still build it. But to your point, you have to know that you're starting with a tough tendency, right? So you make the joke all the time, like, or you make the saying all the time, like, am I an anxious person or am I someone that has anxiety?
Right.
Am I a disciplined person or am I someone that has discipline?
Right.
I'd like to think I'm I mean, I know I'm the latter, right? But maybe it's, did I start out that way? Did I have that tendency toward discipline? I don't think so. Maybe I wish I'd no shot at anybody that was helping me along the way, but I don't think so. I think I'm more disciplined now as I have grown into it.
Yeah. I would venture to say that you, for all intents and purposes, have the skill of discipline, and maybe that's a spectrum in some degree, or there's levels to that, right? Everyone has this, and this is just kind of true. Your basic psychology, you've got traits, and each of these traits you're either more or less of naturally, right? Whether more or less naturally aggressive or more or less disciplined, and so everyone has their set point, maybe, is a good way to think about it. But that doesn't mean that actively defines you in any sense either. I think for many people, it probably does, because we've had discussions on fixed mindset. And so people say, well, I'm not particularly confident. I've started, at level 10, and that's all it is. And they accept that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have other traits which are, more leading on the positive side potentially. But people kind of accept stories that they tell themselves, right? They accept that, and they don't necessarily embrace growth or change. And I think it's definitely true with discipline. I mean, you do plenty of coaching, so you must observe the same thing. But as I talk with people about changing their nutrition habits or their movement habits or health habits in general, I often find that there are people who can put changes in place and embrace them and do the best they can, and they really have just a great growth mindset, and maybe this is dependent on their ability in practice, in discipline. And some people really have a hard time. That doesn't make it impossible, though. Oftentimes, change takes much longer than one would think. You almost think about change in the whole like fix it quick kind of thing. I listen to some podcast or I talk with someone, they say do this, and that, and then I implement it, and boom, that's change. But that's not change at all. That's not how it works, right? And I venture you would agree with that.
Absolutely, it's our issue with time. We perceive that our time should be, it should take this much time. It should take this much time, based on some limiting belief that we gave ourselves, and some Instagram post that says change your habits in 27 days or some nonsense like that. But we both agree that it can be done. We both agree that you can develop the skill of discipline. So now that we agree, and you have to agree now because we agree, we're going to take it a little step further, because I think that it's important for people out there that are like, all right, how? Cool. Like, I'm not a disciplined person. I don't have the self-discipline that you have, because clearly you go to the gym, clearly you work out. I don't have that, right? Okay, cool. Well, we're not going to tell you how to develop the habit of going to the gym. Quite frankly, it's not what we're here to do. But I think we can tell people some steps that they can take to become more disciplined. And I was preparing for this and stumbled into Marcus Aurelius, it's hard to read his birth date because it's 120. 120 years after Christ, this dude was born. Cool, got it, okay. He was the Roman emperor, but you brought this up, just kind of say it to the audience, like, even though he was one of the most powerful men in the world, if not the most powerful man in the world at the time, he was very self-reflective. And he's boiled it down to 10 ways that you can develop the skill of self-discipline. So we'll start, I'll go through them all. We'll go through them all real quick. And if you're out there and you're listening and you have to rewind this because something hit home with you, do it. It's worth it. First of all, before you listen any further, put something in your mind, some big goal out there that you want to be more disciplined towards. And it would be too obvious for me to just throw out the fitness one or the nutrition one.
Right.
Maybe something else for you as the audience. Maybe it's a lifestyle change or a job or something. Maybe my goal is to find something I'm passionate about and engage in it more. So here it is. Number one thing to becoming more self-disciplined. Your purpose has to be greater than your desire to not have that thing. You have to find your why. You have to be purposeful about your why. And I'll give you a real funny example, stupid example, only one that comes to my mind. We don't poop on the floor because we know that the alternative to pooping on the floor is terrible.
Yeah.
No one likes you. Right. You got to clean it up. It's stinky. You just wouldn't do it. So we're disciplined enough to say, hey, Ryan, I got to go to the bathroom.
Right.
I know it's a silly one.
Right.
Okay. There's a purpose.
Well, I mean, it's actually kind of a great point, and we brought up a very similar point with confidence, is that oftentimes people say, I'm not self-disciplined, but you have discipline in other areas, and it's totally evident. I mean, obviously you're not defecating on the floor. I mean,
so I'm taking this down the wrong foot. Go on.
There probably are some, I don't know. Anyways, but there are kind of like external forces that have us be disciplined, and there's at least some self-discipline within the realm of everything that we do on a daily basis. If you brush your teeth, that's an amount of self-discipline, which, to be fair, I work with a lot of people who struggle with that, right? I mean, and it's not to say that anything about it, but there are areas even that those people are very disciplined in. So it's a matter of recognizing, I think, is really nice, and I like the idea about you need to have a purpose. If you have a why, you can bear any how, right? That's that. I actually forget who said that. Do you know?
I'm not sure.
God, that's embarrassing. But nonetheless, it is important for you to find the purpose, because even the teeth brushing example, why brush your teeth? Well, because you don't want your teeth falling out. Great, that's all it takes sometimes, right? Just having the why sorted out and having that be almost tangible in front of you. Why is it that you want to find your passion, right? You're not just finding your passion because MJ said you should find your passion. It's probably a good idea, and you're like, okay, great. That's not a great why.
Right.
It needs to be intrinsic.
So ask yourself. So before we move on to the second part of this, maybe if you're out there thinking about your own particular goal or something you want to become more disciplined around, ask yourself first, what is something that I know that I'm disciplined in now? Right? Like I know I always go home and I make my kids dinner. Why? Because my desire for them to be healthy humans exceeds my desire to just kind of skip dinner that night because I wasn't hungry. Mm-hmm. Right? So what is something that you're disciplined about, and figure out what your why is for that. And then as you start to think about this goal that you have during this podcast or post, think about what why might make a difference for you. Yeah. So the second thing you said, and this is when it starts to really hit home with me that you can become more skilled in the school of discipline, is break it down. He says, show up for yourself. And essentially what he's getting at is create these small milestones for yourself so that you can practice being disciplined at them. So an example, I guess we would use is, we'll go the opposite. We always talk people, to Alicia's point, we're always talking about diet culture, right? Let's talk a little bit for 1 second about like bodybuilding culture, right? For bodybuilders, they want to lift weights, they want to get in the gym, they want to train 2-3 times a day, but they want to eat 6-7 times a day. And they talk about it's very difficult to do that. You got to become disciplined around eating 6 or 7 times a day. So in essence, what they're getting the opportunity to do every night, they're getting the opportunity to prep their food and become disciplined about prepping their food. Every day, they're getting the opportunity to say, I'm going to eat this. I'm going to take out this time. I'm going to eat 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 this time. I'm going to develop the skill of being disciplined around when I eat, how much I eat, and what I eat in order to achieve my goal of being the biggest man on the planet or the fittest person on earth or whatever their goal is. But what they've done, they didn't just say, I want to put on 10 pounds and I want to look this great in my show. I have to develop the discipline for these small milestones so that I can work at being disciplined so that I can achieve my goal.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's about creating the experiences that you almost want to foster in the future. Have more experiences of eating meals more frequently, and that's who you're going to become eventually. And I have this kind of quote that's very interesting, and it reigns true for this topic, is that you can't be any greater than who you are right now, but you can aim to become greater by having more experiences in the light or in the image of who you want to become. And so to break it down, essentially meaning you have to accept where you're at, right? For someone who is a bodybuilder or who is juvenile bodybuilder getting into it, they need to recognize that they are not Mr. Olympia. And that doesn't mean that they can't become the greatest or the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioner or the greatest basketball player, the greatest football player, whatever the actual sport is. You're not them right now. And that's okay, but you have to recognize that. And you then have to approach the plan, so to speak, with that in mind. And you can aim to become these greats or the person who is great at that task by having more experiences that the greats do, right? And so the greatest bodybuilder of all time means a lot, right? And so you need to have more experiences of eating a lot. It doesn't need to be perfect by any means. It just you need to have more of those experiences. The same thing with the basketball player or the person practicing jiu-jitsu. What do people who are the greatest, highest level of jiu-jitsu do? Well, they probably train a lot, and they probably compete a lot, and they probably study a lot. Well, what do you need to do? You need to do more of those things. It doesn't need to be the 2-3 times a day that some of them do it, or it doesn't need to be your life right this second. A lot of the people who are the greatest at what they do evolve into that. It's not a choice. But you can aim, but you can choose to have more of those experiences, and that will start to change how you view yourself in general over time. But a lot of people struggle with that as they want to take on these big tasks. They look exactly, what does LeBron's day look like, and then they're trying to copy that. It's like impossible. It's not realistic.
Yeah, then you become overwhelmed.
Right.
And he says, not me, becoming overwhelmed leads to procrastination, leads to stagnation. Then you're no longer disciplined. You're not moving forward. You hit on his third point, which is consistency, right? More of these experiences and being consistent every day, showing up for yourself, right? Remember, the reason we're being disciplined is because we have a why. We're showing up for that why. And the question is, can you reframe that why to say, I'm doing this now for myself, and deeply connect to that why? And that will lead to some level of consistency. Do you agree?
Yeah. And sometimes it takes a long time, right? Like it really might take a long time that you have to be consistent, and that's where people then focus on the outcomes. If they are outcome focused, which we should not be, but if we are outcome focused, we're going to get beat down every day that we don't see those outcomes. And you could be, it reminds me of this image of like it's a kind of like a gold digger, right? And he's mining through the cavern wall, and on one side of the image, he's one strike away from hitting the bank of diamonds or the bank of gold, and he gets depressed and walks out. And it's like, well, he just needed to be that one more consistent, less outcome focused, and just focusing on the inputs. If you do the inputs, you can trust that the outputs will come, but the time part, we can't. We have no ability to conceptualize that for any journey we're on. It could be tomorrow the greatest, the greatest outcome. It could be 10 years from now. It's hard to say.
Yeah, well said. So this is where he kind of veers off of the stuff that maybe we inherently know, right? And he talks about putting yourself in intentional hardship is a way. Remember, we're talking about a way for you to form more self-discipline. He uses the example. Remember, this guy's a Roman, sleeping on the floor. I would choose a lot of other hardships. Personally, I don't like sleeping on the floor. But sleeping on the floor, taking a cold shower, skipping a meal, just things that are not going to ruin your day, but they're going to cause hardship. Going outside in the cold when you know it's going to be cold out, no jacket, just something like that, as a way to build self-discipline. Can you maybe extrapolate on that? It's an interesting one, but he hits it home pretty well.
Yeah, I think this is if there's. I know we reviewed some of the points beforehand, but I would say that for me, this is probably one of the key main points that someone can do to build their sense of self-discipline. One thing that I really like, and this is from a lot of like the Buddhist kind of ideas, is that you should embrace discomfort, right? And we all know that, but you can actually practice discomfort regularly. And you've already mentioned that, you know, cold showers or waking up early, or I have this mat, this Shakti mat, and it's like kind of like an acupressure mat, and they've discussed kind of anecdotal evidence. It does this and increases blood flow, which it might, but I actually do it sometimes just for the discomfort. I'll sit there and I'll lay down on this spike mat. It's really not comfortable. It's really uncomfortable actually. But the practice of me saying, you know what, I can do this for 10 minutes and I can bear this discomfort for 10 minutes is really kind of a nice practice. It kind of gives you a little bit of perspective on the day, and that I can choose these uncomfortable things. And someone would argue, well, Ryan, what's the point? Why lay on that thing? If there's no medical benefit, if there's no immediate benefit to that, why do this uncomfortable? Why lay on the spike mats, man? Because I can. Because I can bear it, and that's why. Same thing with jiu-jitsu. Why go and get beat up when you're brand new and you're hopping on the mats for the first time and you're getting smashed every single day? Why? Well, because you can, and there's power in that. Whether people choose to see that or not, there's power in being able to say, yeah, I'm just going to do it just because. A lot of things that we probably should do don't have a greater purpose than that a lot of times. Like just because I can and I want to, that's, for a lot of people, that's where they might need to start.
I love that. And there's nothing like being done with something and being able to tell yourself, the only reason I did that is because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. I wanted to prove to myself that I would be disciplined to do it. Mm-hmm. Like when you turn the cold shower, yeah, there's medical benefit. Yes, it will bring down your sympathetic. It will do a lot of good things for you. But let's face it, the reason you're turning that dial is because you're like, I'm going to be disciplined about this today. Mm. And there's one thing that I did today that is discipline. And maybe I don't do it tomorrow, but today I'm successful. Today I found a way to be disciplined. Yeah. And when you were talking, I took a course at Babson College. They're the number 2, I think, entrepreneurs school in the country. And they were teaching us what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And I'm grateful for the course and grateful for being the opportunity. But number 1 thing they did was write down your goal. And then page 2, they flipped the script on you and said, what are you willing to give up to accomplish your goal?
I love it.
And I thought, that's pretty amazing that we go right there. If you're really serious about achieving something, then what is it? What are you going to be disciplined enough to not do or to do consistently in order to achieve the goal? So.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's super powerful, right? It's, it's not just the trek up the mountain and being at the peak that is, what everyone thinks of when they think of climbing Mount Everest, right? It's like we've probably all I've had that thought, like, oh, let me do Mount Everest. This is an intrusive passing thought, right? Like no amount of serious consideration there. But I think, oh, that'd be cool to be at the top and be like, oh, I did that. But then, missing almost every hardship through that. And I suppose if someone really wanted to do a very challenging task, they probably should focus on what needs to be given up, what might you experience, what are truly the hardships there, and embrace them, because every change has, in every decision, maybe better said, every decision that we make, we actually need to give up an infinite amount of other things. And so what are those other things that you do now or you hold on to now that it might be a little hard for you to give up, and coming to terms with that, I think is really important.
So, and the next topic that he moved on to is, again, developing the skill, and something I know I struggle with. He calls it the dichotomy of control. All right. Controlling the things, we've heard this a million times, a million ways, controlling the things that you can control, and releasing, allowing, ignoring, letting go of the things that you cannot control. And now, when I think about that in relationship to being disciplined, how often do you allow the things you cannot control to derail you from your consistency of being disciplined?
Yeah. How often do the things that you can't control you in some ways? Yeah. I used to be one of those people who would kind of like replay situations in my mind, like, I'd be all down on myself, like, oh, I could have said that. I should have said that. Why did that sound so silly? And then I would go through all the other things. I could have said this, and that would have been funny. I should have done this, and that would have been it. It's almost like that Seinfeld episode where he makes a joke, and then it kind of like really dead in the water, and then he's in his car driving back, and he's like, oh, I could have said that, and so that makes me think. I mean, I used to do that all the time.
How many arguments you won in the shower?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I won them all.
So good at that.
Won them all.
2 days later, I can crush it.
Yeah. But when I started practicing mindfulness and becoming more self-aware, kind of recognizing that, well, it's not even real. Those situations I'm playing back are not even real. In fact, they're probably not me. They're not authentically me. And I mean, there's always a better way to say something. I could probably think of 1,000 different ways I could have said something I said in the last 10 minutes better. But you know what? It's okay. It's fine. I can't control that. I can only control what's happening in the now. And in fact, when I spent a lot of time trying to fixate on those other things that I can't control, active things are passing me in the moment that I could control, that I then, I'm going to spiral
Spiraling,
into.
yeah.
So I think it's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're writing this down and you're kind of following along, right? We're thinking about our why. We're developing a plan to make small milestones. We're showing up for ourselves every day. We're really taking that moment to write down a couple things that we can control, and maybe even write down a couple things that you can revisit later on as out of your control. So when you get tied up as to which one's which, because we do, you can say, okay, no, I remember that was going to be out of my control. The next one, and one that we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, is never play the victim. All right, so how easy is it when you are on your path, you're doing your thing, you're eating your 6 small meals a day, I wish I could come up with a better example off the top of my head that wasn't nutrition, but I'll get there. Yeah. You're on your path, whatever that goal is that you have, right? How easy is it for when you get knocked off the path to say, that wasn't my fault? That's just the way I am. Guess I'm not disciplined. I knew it. Yeah. Maybe it was something out of your control that knocked you off, which would make it even harder to come to terms with. But what is it like to take that extreme ownership, 100% ownership around your discipline, not your goal, but your ability to be disciplined around the tasks?
Right. Yeah, extreme ownership, I like that. Extreme ownership around your actions, right? And maybe veering off to well, maybe another ways to think about this. Maybe we don't beat ourselves up about it, about when things fall off track, but maybe we own up to it at the same regard too, or in the same regard too, and taking each experience where we've veered off track and in learning from that. And in fact, I have a pattern that I've noticed in a lot of behavior change that I think is really, really interesting. And I mention this to people that I work with. A lot of the times you're going to fall off track, you're going to lose a little bit of focus, something's going to happen, there's going to be holidays, there's going to be events, there's going to be big life stressors that pop up out of nowhere, things you can't control. And that is absolutely going to veer you off what your original focus is. And so sometimes people will come in and say, well, Ryan, this was just a really challenging week. It was really tough. And, almost getting into that victim mentality in the sense that like, I can't do it. It's too hard. It's not working. It's this, it's that. And when I share with them, and this is really true, this is an observation that happens more times than it doesn't, is that when we have those really tough weeks and we can actually learn from them and we can say, well, here's what happened and I can make sense of that. I own up to that, but let's try and put in a plan for next time and make sure it doesn't happen. And it does seem a little cliche, but every time someone literally almost every time someone has a challenging week, when they come see me the next week or a couple weeks after, they're doing better than they ever were, as long as they continue with that kind of like growth mindset, as long as they don't beat themselves up and kind of get down in the dumps about it, they don't play the victim. If they do, they're kind of, it's kind of probably game over, but if they choose not to play the victim and they just run with it and learn from it, they always do better. It's like they need that to get to the next level.
Yeah, 100%. And they talk about it in like rehabilitation, right? When people that are addicted to drugs and alcohol. Absolute honesty, they call it. Can I be absolutely honest with myself? And let's face it, if you're playing the victim, you're not being absolutely honest with yourself. Deep down at the very recesses of your soul, whatever it is, you know that you can't play the victim and pull yourself out or become more disciplined or get after your goal. You can slip up, like to your point, right? And then to the next section here, to the next point, right? He talks about surrounding yourself with role models. Finding role models, finding community, finding people that are disciplined. And talk to me a little bit about that, because for the first time, he's gone from this internal world where everything's don't play the victim, 100% consistency, honesty, all the stuff, to, hey, there's an environmental factor here. And you can create an environment for yourself where you're likely to be successful, likely to be more disciplined. What does that look like?
Yeah, I used to never place a lot of emphasis on the role model thing, but over the years, recognizing how important that truly is, it's nice to have someone who is either a role model or a mentor of some capacity, because then they can help guide you. You've had someone who has been through it, has learned the specific discipline sector with great depth, and for them to be able to provide advice or to show you the way or to say, hey, you're on track, I think is really important. This is one of the reasons why coaching, kind of like what you do is, and honestly what I do, is why it's so helpful, right? It's not that the coach is perfect, and it's not that you're incapable of doing these things without it. It's that to have someone to guide you and to take a step back and say, well, you could do it this way, or you could try it this way, or you are on the right path. Keep doing what you're doing. I think is more valuable than people want to actually own up to.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And we started off by talking about the environment that you're in when you're younger. Mm-hmm. And how likely we think you're more likely if you're surrounded by those quote unquote good role models. In this topic, that's how you discipline. And now he's telling you here, now that you're old enough to be wise enough to be following these steps, it still applies. You can still use it. So there's two more aspects to this. And again, if you're thinking about your own goal or thinking about something you want to be disciplined enough, you try to make this as relatable to you as possible. I find it interesting that not only did he talk about intentionally suffering, but he also talks about delayed gratification. And let's face it, we talked about giving something up in order to achieve your goal, right? But almost seems like a opportunity to practice being disciplined. I'm going to intentionally delay gratification here as a way so I can tell myself that I am being disciplined. Does that track for you?
Yeah, definitely. Right, like why delay gratify or delay the gratification? Well, because you're probably going to receive more in the end, right? And that's going to be nice. But again, maybe it's just because you can. So many people say, well, it doesn't matter, right? Well, if I delay my gratification or I practice discomfort or I do this thing, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it does. It does. Everything. If you approach things with a particular focal point or a particular mindset, and you do that with a nice kind of, hopefully a healthy mindset, then you're probably going to do the same thing. You're probably going to approach most other things in your life with that mindset. So if you approach, I don't know, the idea of eating well, just for the sake of example, and you approach a snack with, I'm gonna make this kind of intentional. I'm gonna make this in a way that like nourishes me and gives me some nutrients and makes me feel satisfied in the same regard and is appropriate and all of that. Well, chances are you're gonna approach more snacks like that, and then chances are you're gonna approach more meals like that. And it's the practice of approaching any action with a healthy mindset is impactful. I mean, that's in essence what building a simple, healthy life is in a lot of ways, is practicing the mindset, practicing, wow, what happens how I go through life in this way? Wow, I actually take ownership of the things I do. Wow, I live my life in a way that's like, hey, maybe pretty good for me. Those little things are better than the grandiose events or task or whatever it is. Like, someone could come up to you, Mike, and say, well, come speak in front of a million people today, and that'd be amazing. One, you may not be ready for it, so everything that you did up until that point probably hadn't prepared you for a million people. You could probably do it, you could probably crush it, and it'd probably be amazing, but it doesn't actually it doesn't mean that you're going to be consistent with your ability to speak and teach and whatever. All it means is that you did an event that was, albeit very impactful, but not as impactful as the consistent little things and little decisions that you choose on your own accord, I would argue.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And that brings us to our last point. And as we're talking through this, and this is one of the reasons we love to do this, because I feel like I get to reevaluate, learn, listen. I'm realizing that he really did a great job at ordering this list, because the last one, the 10th one, is honest reflection daily, right? And he was part of the Stoics, right? Honest reflection is how he got these concepts. He didn't have anybody to tell them, right? He didn't have a Marcus Aurelius to tell us about being self-disciplined. He had to come through his own honest reflection. So if you're listening, and I'll give it's late in the game, but I'll give the example. We're opening our labs, and that's a new company, completely different than anything we've ever done before. I had very little knowledge on how to get that done. I've had to go through these steps. I have to identify my why, really figure out if they were just truly altruistic and self-serving, or they were actually for the reasons I tell myself they are. Break down all these lists, start to delay my gratification, choose to do things, figure out what I had to give up. Avoid the naysayers that told me that it was in the wrong spot. That's too expensive. It's not going to work. Surround myself with people like you, people that will lift me up, that are disciplined, that can show. And then the last piece here is write down at the end of the day, did I do what I wanted to do, intended to do? Was I actually doing the thing? Did I do it? Not Did I do it tomorrow, or did I do it literally today? Did I do it? Was I disciplined? Did I take my cold shower? What did I do? And that honest reflection, I think, will trip a lot of people up.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a great example using yourself, and you do a lot of self-reflection. I mean, you do a lot of journaling. I mean, how often do you journal? Is it more or less than what it was? I mean, I know you were doing a good amount.
Yeah, pretty consistently every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, how long have you been doing that? How many years?
I started at the end of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't know this, I did an entire year where I didn't write anything negative. I just only wrote positive stuff in my journal. And that, the entire year, actually, I have 4 of these now. They're all the same one. Thank you, Corey, for getting them for me. What I'm now realizing, now that we're having this discussion, is I was essentially building the habit of journaling, building the discipline of journaling.
Right.
And even though I was taking those steps every day, I, for my own self, don't consider that first year journaling the way I consider it now. I consider it writing down the candy-coated version of the world I wanted to see, or maybe speaking into existence who I wanted to become, or maybe putting affirmations out there, or reminding myself consistently the world is good, or any of that, but not actively engaged in, did I do what I said I was going to do today? I did not do what I said I was going to do today. Today I failed, or I was not as good as I could have been.
Yeah, it is so interesting that you did a year just like, life is great in 2020 nonetheless. But it almost demonstrates another idea that I think is really powerful for a lot of people is do it poorly. If you struggle doing it at all, do it poorly. Journal poorly. Like, I would probably say that's pretty poor journaling to say. I mean, not to say
it was, yes.
It's still an achievement on the right to do anything is an achievement. Don't get me wrong, but doing something poorly removes the barriers that we have. A lot of people sit down for journaling specifically and say, I don't know what to write. I feel awkward. I feel embarrassed. I don't achieve anything in the moment. Again, we're always looking for this outcome that's like right there. Like, I want to journal, and then all my life's answers pop up on the page. Oh, wow, that's amazing. But it doesn't work like that. You know, you just have to do things, right? Because they're probably going to serve you, and you may not know exactly why, but there's some purpose there. And then you maybe just do it poorly. You sing. If you want to learn to sing, sing poorly. You know, practice singing poorly, and get it out, right? It's like writing. You want to write somewhere, write crap and throw it out there, and then get better with it, right? And so I think it's kind of a nice thing to integrate as we talk about discipline, is like, if you're worried about the judgment from others or the judgment from yourself or whatever it might be, then go in and say, oh, I'm just going to do it bad. And eventually you're going to get good at doing it. And that's really what's important. And then you can focus on doing it well.
Yeah, really well said. Nice job.
Nice. Appreciate it.
Well, man, so those are his steps, okay? We outlined them for you. Maybe we outlined them for ourselves today a little bit too, right? Go back, listen, spend a couple minutes for your own goal, your own desire to be disciplined on what that is, and run through them for yourself. I was able to do it pretty quickly for me in my R labs, but it's because I've been reflective on it and thinking about it, and I'm 6 months in. If you're just starting something, do it poorly, but just start. Go after it. Do you have anything else that you want to say on discipline?
Yeah, I mean, just understand that discipline is a skill, and that it is something that you just need to put effort into, and the important part is to make sure that you're not engaging in guilt and shame as much as you may have in the past, because that serves no purpose here, right? We're all working on certain things. We're all trying to get better, and that's beautiful. And never knock yourself for trying to get better. I mean, it's powerful. I think it's to be human is to be chasing, running away a little bit from that inferiority kind of complex. And so, yeah, what I would say then is, if you're looking for more podcasts like this, check us out on Spotify. If you have conversations or topics that you think you would find interesting, please give us a comment or shout us out. We would love to hear from you, and then we will catch you next time.